Today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show is brought to you by Diabolic DVD. For almost 20 years, Diabolic DVD has been the source for horror, cult, and weird cinema to customers around the world. Diabolic offers a one-stop shopping experience for all of your favorite labels, including Arrow, Synapse, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Blue Underground, 88, and many more from all corners of the globe. So whether you're looking for the definitive version of Suspiria or trying to upgrade your crusty old DVD of Cannibal Holocaust, Diabolic is the owner-operated small business choice you've been craving. Shop online at diabolicdvd.com. That's DIABOLIK DVD.com. We're also brought to you by Deadly Grounds Coffee. It's the #1 choice of horror fans worldwide. Nothing starts your day or night better than a delicious cup of Deadly Grounds. Whether you're hunting ghosts or fighting the next zombie apocalypse, any one of Deadly's 30-plus roasts will bring you to caffeine nirvana with the richest flavor you've ever had. Whether you're craving their Hellhound Roast, Witch's Brew, Devil's Night Roast, or Sinful Delight, order online at getdeadly.com for easy and safe shipping right to your door. We know that once you go deadly, you won't go back. Join the deadly revolution today. Be bold, be different, be deadly. Deadly Grounds Coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. Get some at getdeadly.com. Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Ozs Rodriguez is a writer and director who first started his career in comedy, having written and directed for Funny or Die and Saturday Night Live, where he's been for multiple years. Ozs just put out his very first feature, Vampires vs. the Bronx, which is now streaming on Netflix. Vampires vs. the Bronx pits a group of young kids from the Bronx against a ruthless gang of vampires who try to take over their neighborhood. It's super fun and scary while also delivering highly potent commentary on the devastating effects of gentrification. Vampires vs. the Bronx really reminded me of the movies that I grew up on as a kid, and I know for a fact that this movie is about to become a gateway horror staple for this generation. I really loved his movie and really enjoyed talking to him. Please give it up for writer-director Ozs Rodriguez. Really enjoyed Vampires versus the Bronx. And Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, but the director of Fright Night, is a friend of mine. I texted him in the middle of it. I was like, have you seen Vampires versus the Bronx yet? He's like, no, not yet. I keep hearing it's great. It's like, you have to see it. It's basically like a very modern, relevant Fright Night, in a way. Wow. Or it was to me. So, yeah, Tom's going to check it out soon. I'll let you know what he thinks.
Well, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You nailed it. It was that movie and Lost Boys and Monster Squad. And it really just came from me wanting to make a version of that for kids that look like me and my friends growing up as Dominican kids. But it sort of came from that desire to make those movies that I saw growing up. As far as like entertainment for kids and stories, like right nowadays, it's like Marvel, that's it. And, Stranger Things had some success there, but that's it. This gets compared to Stranger Things, and I think it's because there's just a lack of stories like this.
Yeah, I grew up on all those movies too. Like Monster Squad was a big favorite, and back in the day, there were kids movies that were really frightening. Like there's genuinely frightening moments in Monster Squad and Little Monsters and stuff like that. And I feel like they're just not making those movies for kids anymore. Like kids movies are not even remotely scary. And to me, there was something about it that kind of toughens your resolve as a kid if you can get through some scary movies. But I don't know if they're treating kids today as just being too soft or what's happening. But this felt like a very refreshing, something that kids could totally see. It's got a very serious message in it, but it also is accessible, and it's not traumatizingly frightening. It's not gonna ruin their childhood. But did you set out to make something that would be relatively child friendly in that regard?
For sure, yeah. I mean, I was very consciously wanting to make a movie that was PG-13 for 13-year-olds and under. And yeah, so I was like, I know I didn't want to get too gory with it, and like there's one F-bomb and that's it.
That's all you're allowed in a PG-13. It's one fuck, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely set out to do it like that because I wanted to make a movie with kids, but also that kids could see it. So yeah, that was definitely by design for sure.
Very, very cool. So how did the movie come together? I mean, could you just walk us through when the idea came to you and how you went about getting it made?
Yeah, for sure. I was in the Dominican Republic. That's where I'm from. It was December 2016. So it was a month after the election. And I was at a crossroads in my career too, because I directed with a friend of mine, and he had passed away, and
oh man, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, it passed away in 2016. So I just had to, it was my first time sort of going alone as a director, and I would work in SNL, and that was, I had like a home to go back to, but I also wanted to, I don't know, it was such a shock, obviously, but also like it was my first time going out alone. And then the state of things, I kind of wanted to tell a story where Black and brown kids could be the heroes.
Yeah.
And I felt like there was a huge lack of those kind of stories. And I've been a director for my whole career and been successful, but I'd never really had written anything. Like, everybody's written a screenplay, but like it's writing and rewriting and getting it to that point. So I decided to try it, and I came up with the idea, and around the same time, Lorne mentioned that he had a deal with Universal, and they were looking at making, they wanted to make sort of a Blumhouse model type thing of like cheaper movies.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing kind of materialized, and I sort of squeezed in there and mentioned the story, and he was like, "Oh, your sounds good." It sort of like kind of left it at that, and then we went somewhere. I forget where we went, me and my wife. And then when I got back, Aaron David, who works with him, had been calling me, and she wanted more information on the story, and like kind of started developing from there. And wrote a treatment, wrote a couple drafts, and then I hooked up with Blaze Hemingway, who really helped me put this into shape and then have a screenplay.
That's great. How did Netflix get involved?
So Netflix acquired it from Universal after we produced it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
And Lorne Michaels wanted to develop like a Blumhouse style horror label, or just low budget?
Comedy.
Oh, comedy. Okay.
So yeah, I snuck in there, I think, because I always I think I was very clear from the beginning that it has vampires in the title and it has horror elements, but I always wanted this to be a fun movie. Like,
yeah,
that was the imperative for me to have a fun time watching this movie, not necessarily veer too much into the horror of it all, or like a straight up comedy. Just have a fun ride for kids.
Yeah.
Again, inspired by those movies we saw growing up.
Yeah, and it was so refreshingly fun, and it reminded me of those old movies as a kid. While the social commentary was very strong throughout the course of the movie, it did not slow the fun down one bit. You got the message in a huge way that was very resonant, but it was still just such a fun movie, and it had some scares in it. I mean, it was a real balancing act, man. It was a whole lot of fun for sure. So, huge congratulations on the movie. How's the reception been?
I think it's been good. I mean, it's been amazing to like see fan art. Like that's one of the last things
cool.
I've been.
You get any tattoos yet?
Any what?
Anybody with tattoos yet from the movie?
Not yet. That's almost terrifying.
Give it time.
That's someone would get a tattoo. But I feel like the reception has been very nice, and I've gotten messages from like parents saying that their kids have like seen the movie and felt and saw themselves represented.
That's great.
Like Latino kids and Black kids, and like that's been amazing. That's been so cool. That was the goal, to make a movie for kids. So that's been just amazing. It's been really, really cool. I think the reception's been nice. Like we were in like the top 10 movies that first week and Netflix. So it's been awesome. And like, my parents are still, I'm from the Dominican Republic. My parents are there. And for this movie to open the same day, worldwide, is incredible. To get the reception here in the US, but also have my parents see it in the DR and have a friend in Italy tell me about it. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is super cool. So how was it working with kids? Because I mean, you had 3 leads that were all kids, and obviously there's rules around working with kids and everything. But they were all really, really good actors, and conveying things like fear, and their comedic timing was really, really good. So what was your kind of directorial process for working with kids? Because for a lot of directors that can be a challenge, but these kids were fantastic. So what was the process like?
Well, when we started casting, it was challenging because for example, for Miguel, the main character, I wanted him to be a Dominican American actor if possible. Like I am Dominican, and I felt like I needed to at least try my best to find a Dominican kid that could act in it. So like that was a challenge, just to find that specific person, but also because our schedule was short, our budget wasn't huge. Like I wanted to try to find an actor that had experience. So I wasn't a green actor that is sort of learning on set. I wanted to have a kid that had some set experience, that had acted before, and was comfortable on set and comfortable with performance. So I got so incredibly lucky finding these kids, and then when we put them together in a chemistry read and audition, they really clicked and they became fast friends on set. So yeah, that was when that happened, I felt like, okay, at least I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
There'll be the other challenges of like they can only work 9.5 hours, or like they have to be done by midnight, and like all those challenges, and they're going through puberty and like growing up and whatever. But like once I saw the 3 of them in a room, and I like saw their chemistry, and I saw how professional and serious about it they were, that was a great feeling. Like that was a feeling of relief, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they come with those kind of group of friends battling some evil force, and for whatever reason they can never tell the adults. The strength of their camaraderie when it comes to their friendship is so critical. And yeah, the kids in this movie, they felt like they'd been friends, their entire lives. Was there any process for establishing that camaraderie amongst them? I mean, did you guys go on field trips or anything like that, or it just naturally blossomed on set?
We hung out a couple of times. I took him to a Yankee game, and we hung out that day. We had, we read the scripts a couple times, and we did some stunt rehearsals. So I tried to like put them together in a room as much as I could before we started shooting. It was, they were always together. Like most of the scenes there, the 3 of them are together, and between takes they were together, at lunch they were together. So like there's a scene where they like are rapping down the street, and that kind of came from, they would just be doing that in between takes, making a dumb song. So I was like, well, you have to do that at some point in the movie. So.
We're using that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So the symbolism of vampires just lends itself so perfectly to the movie. I mean, the idea of the gentrification theme of people just sucking the life and culture out of neighborhoods works so perfectly for vampires. I just was shocked nobody had done it before. Were there any kind of previous versions of the story where you were either considering other symbols like, I don't know, zombies or werewolves, or was it just vampires from day one?
Well, I had this idea with a friend of mine, with Matt, who I directed with, in film school. We had this idea about a apartment that's run by vampires. We always had that in the back of our mind. So like I've always been a fan of vampires, and sort of had this idea of a vampire movie that we hadn't really cracked. but then I think everything clicked when I started. I knew I wanted to make a movie with Dominicans in New York City. And speaking to Dominicans from Washington Heights, which is a big community in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them had similar stories about how the neighborhood is changing, how it's gentrifying, how the culture is literally being sucked out. And then something clicked there, and I went right into vampires. And then another big community or area where there's a lot of Dominicans is the Bronx.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just made that connection right away, and the title came super early in the process. So yeah, I think because people were saying, sort of using the same words of like sucking out the culture and taking everything out, and like it just clicked.
Yeah. Cool. So how did you've been with Saturday Night Live for a really, really long time. Very
Mm-hmm.
enviable position. What was your overall career trajectory like? I mean, how did you get to be such a big part of SNL? What was your kind of origin story as far as that's concerned?
So grew up in the Dominican Republic, wanting to be in movies somehow and TV, just wanted to work on that. Like growing up, once I learned what a director does, I felt like, oh, that's what I want to do. That sounds really cool. It took me a little bit to be able to go to film school because I graduated high school, saved up, ended up going to college for another thing, and also working as an editor in the DR. That's the first like skill I learned, which I still use to this day, which is maybe the first advice I'll say. Like, if as a director, knowing how to edit is extremely. I feel like it's extremely important and a great way to learn what is essential.
Yeah,
and what you need to make a scene. So yeah, I was finally I went to LA. I went to the LA Film School. And went to film school. I met Matt Valines there, and after we graduated, we started making shorts. We tried to make music videos first, and at that point, no one was MTV was kind of dead. No one was
right.
There was no money, no greats. All the bands were asking us for money or asking us to produce it and pay for it. We're like, we just came out of film school. We have no money. And then a friend of ours had an idea for a sketch and we had nothing to do. And we're like, yeah, man, we'll do it. And did that sketch. And I believe maybe one more and got contacted by this website called Super Deluxe. That was an offshoot of Adult Swim. It was kind of like Funny or Die.
Mm-hmm.
It was their comedic sketches. And they gave us money to make 3 sketches, and then they gave us money to make 10, and then they ultimately gave us money to make 30. So for like a year and a half, we were making shorts, and it was like the first time I've been paid to direct. And then they ran out of money, so then I had no job. Ended up teaching at the LA Film School, and then I sent a DM to Adam McKay at the Funny or Die website, and I was like, "Hey, this is our stuff." It was like I shot in the dark.
Cold email.
Didn't check for like a day or two because I was like, "Well, there's no way." And I believe he responded the same day, and ended up getting a general meeting at Funny or Die, and from there ended up getting hired, and that was sort of a step above, or the next step as far as sketch comedy directing, and started working with all kinds of celebrities from A to F list, and bigger budgets. So yeah, I did that for a little bit, and then the majors called, and I ended up going to SNL because there's this Funny or Die. Funny or Die, Adam McKay, Will Ferrell started it, and also Andrew Steele, who was a head writer at SNL. So there's a connection to SNL. I truly don't know how it happened, but one day my agent called and they're like, "Hey, they want to fly you out to New York for an interview." And then 4 weeks later, I had moved to New York.
Wow.
It was so fast.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, and that changed my life. SNL is SNL. So yeah, after that, I was able to do episodic TV, and yeah, it changed my life. It's afforded me a bunch of great opportunities for sure.
That's really amazing. So as far as comedy is concerned, I mean, I think it's one of the hardest genres to write effectively. What was your comedic education like? Either, whether it's improv classes or just watching lots of stand up and watching lots of comedy, where did your comedic sensibility and comedic writing ability and directing ability come from? I mean, what was your kind of comedic education like?
Well, that's interesting. I think, I grew up in the Dominican Republic, consumed a lot of TV, but also watch a lot of American television, but watch also Spanish TV and Dominican TV. And I feel like Dominicans have an attitude towards things that's a little bit more relaxed and joyful, I guess. And my family and friends are. I feel like I was surrounded by comedy in a way always, but
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a filmmaker and always was interested in comedy, but I never thought I'd be like so deep in comedy world. So I don't know, it just sort of happened because I didn't do improv classes, I didn't like take stand-up classes, I haven't done stand-up. It's just I liked filmmaking, and I like comedy, and I don't take myself so seriously. So I think all those things maybe coalesced into something there. But I think I can't really tell you. Like, for example, I've been asked if this SNL job was a dream come true, and it's a dream, but I never even thought this was a job you could do.
Yeah.
So I'd be lying to say it's a dream come true. It's a dream to work and work with these amazing people and do these amazing things, but I didn't even know this was possible. So
Right.
Yeah, I think I've always enjoyed comedy, and it's been maybe my favorite genre, but I never thought didn't think I would end up here. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, and horror comedy I really enjoy. I feel like the two genres blend together really, really well. There's a lot of controversy about it, but
well, I think they're both similar in that, like, it's set up and punchline or set up and scare in a way. So I feel like they have that similarity for sure, and I think they're also interesting genres in which you can have a conversation about some deeper subjects without it being too preachy.
Right.
Which I really enjoy.
Yeah, they both use metaphor pretty well. Horror in particular, yeah. I mean, horror historically has always been the genre that is most confrontational about actual social issues because it can hide behind metaphor, but it also is it's very confrontational in a way. I think that's one of the reasons why the genre matters so much.
Mm-hmm.
So is horror, I mean, this was your directorial feature debut, right?
Yeah, it's the first time I wrote and directed my own thing. Yeah.
Very cool. So do you think you want to stick with horror or go on to make real movies?
Well, I'm a big
quote
fan of
unquote.
I'm a big fan of genre movies. So
nice.
it was really exciting to step a little bit out of the comedy game. Obviously it's got a lot of funny people and it's got jokes and it's a fun movie, but it wasn't just like a straight up comedy. So yeah. I would love to keep doing that. I mean, I've been successful in comedy. I'm still doing stuff in comedy, and I'm not going to say no to some of these amazing opportunities. But I've also, grew up watching these sci-fi, fantasy, adventure movies. So that's sort of what I love. I love genre movies. And yes, I would love to do a straight up horror movie at some point.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, now is just kind of the heyday for it in a huge way. I mean, I feel like horror is just getting more and more important, especially, I mean, Stranger Things just kicked off just floodgates being open for nostalgic horror, horror that reminds us of what we all loved and grew up on. But yeah, because I think a lot of 80s kids now are of the age where they're actually directing things and they're doing all the stuff that they love. And I think that's also why we're seeing a lot of practical effects come back,
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely fun. Yeah, it's definitely fun. So it's a pretty prolific writer. Do you have any sort of a consistent writing practice, like a daily word minimum or anything like that? I mean, what does your writing practice look like?
Well, this is all new to me, so it's a balancing act because, like, for example, I'm working on a job right now where I'm directing, so I wish I had more time for writing. So I think it's all new. I'm very new to this, so I'm trying to make myself have a schedule where you write every day, but then also, like, for example, the pandemic happened, and it's like, we're just talking about this today with a friend of mine, and when the pandemic hit, people were at home. Like, a lot of people were like, "Great, now I have time to finish my screenplay and do all these things." But it's hard sometimes to get in that zone when, like, friggin' the world is on fire,
Yeah. I've heard that from multiple people who thought, in theory, I should have a lot of writing time. But because of everything that's going on, I am just having an existential crisis. I don't feel like writing. I'm not motivated to write because of everything that's going on. A lot of people are very distraught to the point where they cannot be creative,
Yeah, so it's been. I wish I could say I have a schedule right now, but when I was working on the movie, I was working on it every day, but it's 2020's been a weird year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I am trying to work up to working every day, and page count is. I think me being new to this, some days you have a really good day, but some days you just fart out one page and that's it.
And one page after a while, it adds up, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I would say one thing I've learned is to not be precious as far as, like, the first few drafts of, like, just really vomiting it out and, like, just, like, going and I started to learn the value of rewriting as far as getting it there. I felt like I think I've learned that if I'm feeling something, just go and write, and even if I can't think of the right word or how to describe, sort of allude to it, and then later on have that make sense of the word mess I threw up in there.
Yeah, I forgot who said it, but some writer said there is no writing, there's only rewriting, just signifying the importance of vomiting out that first draft. And by doing that, you get to the end, and then you know what the movie's really about, and then you can rewrite it in a way more informed way. It just seems to make more sense that way. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I like I mentioned before, Vampires was the first thing I feel like I've written, because everyone's written a screenplay. You throw a rock, especially in LA, and everyone's written a screenplay, but it's really the rewriting of it all and getting it to that place where it's presentable and shootable, that is the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So last few questions here. Were there any books or resources that were particularly formidable for you and when it comes to your career, either creatively or from a business perspective?
About vampires, or just in general?
Oh, just in general, either like filmmaking books or directing books or writing books, or, hey, why not vampire books too?
Two books I read in film school that I loved and found really helpful were Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew, and then Getting Away with It, the Steven Soderbergh book that I believe he wrote either right before or right after Out of Sight.
Perfect.
And it was, they sort of demystified the act of directing, and it was really educational for me.
What is next for you? I mean, I know you're on a show right now, but what else are you working on? Any features in the works?
Yeah, for sure. I'm writing a feature, and I would love to keep telling stories that have diverse heroes as the leads, and that's what I'd love to do. So yeah, I'm writing a story. It's a sci-fi story with kids again. I'm really drawn to to genre stories that have people of color as the leads. That's sort of what I want to do right now. And so, yeah, I'm working on something which I'm very excited about, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
All right.
But it's a sci-fi kids story.
Sounds awesome. Cool. Well, I will definitely be looking out for it. Ozs, this is a real pleasure, man. Thank you so much. Any parting advice or wisdom for those aspiring directors out there?
I would say try to find a way to be creative every day. It's a very hard business, and it can really put you down sometimes. But I think it's imperative to be creative every day if you can, either writing something or shooting something. And I tell this to young people, film students, whenever I can, that like they have a great camera on their phone. I feel like an old person when I say that. I'm like, when I was your age, I didn't have a camera on your phone. But like, you can shoot, edit, color correct, do music on your phone.
Yeah, Soderbergh did it with, I think it was Unsane.
Yeah, and the new one, High Flying Birds too, shot it on iPhone. And that is that's hugely educational. Like, I think people sometimes get frustrated because if they shoot something on the phone, it doesn't feel like it looks like how they want it to look. And that's understandable. You don't have the right actors or the right lighting equipment, the right whatever, but it's super important to get some at bats so you can learn.
Yeah.
And I think one thing is like, if you're starting out, and when I taught in film school, I would tell people to like just do a short, so you can just do a short, but really concentrate on the editing, so that you sort of push yourself and learn how to edit, and do a short where you really push yourself to like light it interesting or learn how lighting works. Or like do a short so you can do some interesting color correct. Like always sort of push yourself and try to learn new things and stay creatively hungry, so that when you get the opportunity, you're ready.
Great. Wise words. Thank you again.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
All right. Here, as always, are some key takeaways from this conversation with Ozs Rodriguez. Number 1, consider learning comedy. There are a lot of parallels and structural similarities between horror and comedy. Both are basically based on a system of setups and payoffs, and the two genres can even work really well together. Ozs has a background in comedy, which was a definite leg up for him when it came time to write and direct his first horror movie. He was also able to effortlessly imbue comedy into the horror, which worked really, really well for Vampires vs. the Bronx. So consider developing your comedic ability, either through comedic writing, directing, improv, or stand-up. Heightened comedic awareness may greatly elevate your ability to craft effective horror. It worked for Ozs, and it also worked pretty well for Jordan Peele. Number 2, cold emails can change your life. At the beginning of his career, Ozs sent a cold email, actually a cold DM on Twitter, to Adam McKay from Funny or Die. Adam liked Oz's material so much that he gave him a job, which ultimately led to Ozs getting on Saturday Night Live, which is the gig of a lifetime. A lot of would-be filmmakers get stuck in the trap of thinking they need to be invited, or that they need to be discovered, or that they need representation in order to pitch themselves. This is not true, and this is how you can waste years of your life just waiting around. Nobody is going to care more about your career than you. So it's incumbent that you get in the habit of pitching yourself to people you don't know through cold emails and cold calls. Yes, of course, it's uncomfortable, but it's so worth it. If you're nervous about how to do this, consider reading some sales books. Also consider getting an IMDb Pro account, which gives you contact information for tons of influential people. Of course, a lot of companies refuse to look at unsolicited materials, but hey, why not give it a shot anyway? The worst they can do is say no, but imagine what could happen if they say yes. Many important people are constantly on the lookout for new voices, so why shouldn't it be you? But they'll never know who you are if you don't start knocking on their doors, so get those cold emails out. Number 3, read Robert Rodriguez's book or Steven Soderbergh's. It's very important to read up on the biographies of filmmakers that you admire so that you can have a career formula to model while gaining insight as to how the business itself actually works. It's also very important to read books that make the actual process of breaking into filmmaking both practical and approachable. In Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez and Getting Away with It by Steven Soderbergh, both filmmakers tell their origin stories in detail. And in both cases, you see how these were just regular guys who went on to become major Hollywood players. Yes, there was lots of toil and hard work in the process, as well as some luck. But in both books, the guys sound like mere mortals, and their journeys into stardom are humanized and made approachable to the point where you can't help but think to yourself, shit, maybe I can do this too. Admittedly, I haven't read Soderbergh's book yet, but I just bought it on Amazon. But I have read Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew multiple times, and it is a must-read. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with your friends and family on social media? Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor, that's I am Nick Taylor, and on Twitter at the same handle. Thanks again for listening to The Nick Taylor Horror Show.